in camera, we have a couple of motions moved by Deputy Mayor Bray, seconded by Councillor Foster. Be it resolved, the Committee of the Whole does hereby receive the update pertaining to personal matters in closed session for information.
Okay, we'll call for the vote. Councillor Boulanger?
In favor.
Deputy Mayor Bray?
In favor.
Councillor Foster?
In favor.
Councillor Kinney?
In favor.
Councillor Watson?
Favor.
Councillor Wells?
In favor.
Mayor Byfolgi?
In favor.
The vote is 7 in favor and 0 opposed. The motion is carried.
Moved by Councillor Foster, seconded by Councillor Boulanger. Be it resolved, the Committee of the Whole does hereby receive the update in closed session pertaining to the potential acquisition or disposition of land for information.
We'll call for the vote. Councillor Boulanger?
In favor.
Deputy Mayor Bray?
In favor.
Councillor Foster?
In favor.
Councillor Kinney?
In favor.
Councillor Watson?
In favor.
Councillor Wells?
In favor.
Mayor Byfolgi?
In favor?
The vote is 7 in favor and 0 opposed. The motion is carried.
Okay, so we did have a couple of presentations today and some information shared in camera, and I believe there was, yeah.
Cosby?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So, having received the numbers that we did in camera for the potential purchase of property, or the values of property, and hearing the conversation that kind of went around, is there any reason to continue that location being considered as a place for a community hub? So with those values that we have seen, is there an appetite at the table that staff continue to work on a community hub going on to the property that we discussed?
And I think today we had a presentation on the library, we had it on the arena. It's been packaged in a hub idea for the past couple of years. There was comments made in both presentations about looking at other options for land. And I think what Deputy Mayor Bray is getting at is that if there's not the appetite around this table to continue with an arena on Main Street in a hub format, then we need to change the direction to staff. So that's where I think decisions need to be made and new direction would need to be given to staff. We want staff to come back with potential properties, the pros and cons, the costs associated with them throughout town, then that would be a new direction that we would need to give to them. Councillor King?
Going back to in camera and coming out of it, I truly think to be fiscally responsible to the town, our first thoughts should be looking at areas where we own land, and especially when you're looking at huge infrastructures like the arena and the library, trying to mitigate costs anywhere we can. And if we have to either go into and buy up properties and have other issues that could revolve from those buying up properties, I don't think it's a good move. Your second question about a hub system, yeah, there's values in it, but I think we can get some of those values by maybe not all on one property, but close proximity, and still capture, you know, the possibility of, as we heard in the library, walk by, which I think is very important, even for any structure in the arena and stuff like that. And still work with our commercial entities and maybe have some of that spin-off without all in one location, but close facsimile of it.
Well, I think the question is, do we around the table support the current hub model as proposed, that staff have the current direction to go forward with on Main Street? If there's not that support for it, then we need to give different direction.
I don't have that support.
Okay, thank you. Who had their hand up? Councillor Wells?
Well, I don't support it as it's listed either. Again, I agree with what was said, mitigating the costs of land we've owned, looking at different options, looking at different locations, and certainly at the very least, as far as I'm concerned, any further activity towards those properties, any properties, should at the very least be deferred until we can give staff direction on where we want to go, and that will come, in my mind, after the directors involved, Chris and should be options and potential costs and so forth. I guess I would say that I would hope that those are attainable in a relatively short period of time. I know it can't be turned over overnight, I understand that, but at least that the priority should be to be looking at those other potential locations as have been discussed, and what the implications are for that in terms of building, costing, providing services, and so forth. So at the very least, defer any further action on these properties, defer any action on any other properties that may be in that strip, until we've had that opportunity to decide what direction we are going in. But I do not support the hub as it is currently structured.
Councillor Wells? No? Councillor Watson? Sorry.
Thank you, Your Worship. I cannot support the community plan as it's constituted now. I applaud Chris and Pam for both bringing alternatives in their presentations today, showing other possible sites for these projects. And I would also want to explore public-private partnerships throughout town if we don't have lands that we own, to go forward with these projects. I'm in favor of both the arena and the library getting these up and going as soon as we can, but not in this particular format of the downtown plan. Now, as far as the incentives go, what is it, this community improvement, can we leave those in place, those incentives? And I'd also actually like to have them maybe put in some other areas in town to stimulate growth, because I'm looking at the whole town, not this little defined area.
And I believe that that's something that we'll be coming forward to discuss as well.
Thank you.
So Deputy Mayor Bray had a comment. Do you need to go first? Because you've been...
No,
Oh, okay.
Deputy Mayor.
I wasn't sure if it was in relation to that.
And mine might be a question for you, because my understanding is that staff currently has the direction to continue moving ahead to do things to develop this format as the community hub. So that was where this motion came based on, or the suggestion for the motion. I don't think the motion has been drafted yet, because I just don't see the appetite at the table to put it there, and based on the land values, I think that gives us that much more reason to maybe look at other options and stop staff time going into something that may or may not happen.
George?
Thank you. So appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I was going to suggest maybe the council does have some options, and option number 2 is what Councillor Wells talked about, was basically pause or put everything on hold for a bit, bring back a report dealing with other options, fully costed. This is what, if it was here, this is what it would cost. This is here, this is what it would cost. So council has full information with respect to that. Option 1 would have been, you've heard enough information, stop right now, give direction no further on it. And then basically option 3 would be to carry on, like just the direction was this, and then staff carry on, and the next steps would be, we have the appraisals now. The direction we had was that we would sit down with the property owners, we would commence that process for negotiation. The planning would continue with respect, so that would be kind of option 3. So those are kind of the 3 options for council. So I know members of council around the table have said it would be helpful if they had additional information on different pieces. Maybe that's something too that needs to be factored in. I just wanted to mention those 3 options for council.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure that if the majority around the table don't want the arena down there, that staff isn't wasting their time on it, that's all. Councillor Foster?
Yeah, and I to George's, I think, options 1 or 2. I don't buy the campus or the all-in-one on Main Street. It's a no-go for me. The components, I'm not as convinced that the library would be a bad fit there. I think it might be a very good fit there, but I want to see what the other options are. There are other locations in town, and I go the linear nature of our town. In a way, I believe that there was some perhaps flaws in logic in that planning theory, and again, I think it's prudent from us to say where are, I think you did it as option 2, what are the other potential locations, whether it's a 5 or 8 acre piece of town-owned land, or whether it's the 3.5 acres that the library needs, or whatever it is. What are those? If they happen to be juxtaposed and we happen to own them, that's fine. If at the end of the day, the only logical reason, the math works out, because I live for math, if all the math works out and it says, it points a big arrow there, then you go, we have to consider it. But I don't believe that, and I'm not willing to support that blindly without having a complete look at all the options that are there. And so I'm not in favor of the hub model.
Well, and I think Councillor Watson made a really important point, is the developer partnerships and things. We have a developer in Sunnydale Trails who said, here's land, build something. Hey, I will build you a satellite library. I'll build the shell and you can have it for free for 20 years. I mean, this is something that we kind of got brushed to the side for 4 years, and we need to be looking at these things. That's cost savings to the municipality. So we need all of this before us to make a proper decision.
And there have been similar conversations with developers
With others.
previously.
Yes, absolutely.
Stonebridge.
Councillor Belanger.
Yes, I'll go back to some conversations I made earlier about, we sit here and we look at everything in isolation, a library, arena, but the reality is that these are catalysts to something else happening. And we're a town with very little commercial base. We're a town with no downtown. We're a town with no reason other than a beautiful natural beachfront to visit. It's quite well known that our brick and mortar, the most prime real estate in our community is primarily social housing, good part of the year. And when you look at some of the things that were being considered, they were catalysts. They were catalysts to ignite private development. So that in 30 years, I looked at our library planning, our track record of the library. Starting in 2003, we did study after study after study. In 2018, we haven't put a shovel in the ground. I think we're really remiss in starting to say that by putting everything all over town, that we're going to create the kind of mass or the kind of catalyst that would really bring private investment and say, geez, we want to be a part of this. And I think we're heading down a path where 30 years from now, we'll still be a town with no downtown. And we'll still be sitting at 4 or 5% commercial base. And we'll soon see our taxes starting to rise to match communities around us. And all I'm saying is, this council didn't even take the time to see the total presentation on the master plan and understand the job creation, the taxation generation for all levels of government, and a lot of other things. And yet, we feel that we can just, in a meeting like this, just dismiss, no, we can't support it. I'm telling you, I don't believe that you have been updated to the point to be even in a position to make the best possible decisions. And I'm not in a disagreement to say that there could be other models that work fairly well and we should investigate. Like if we can create a hub that can generate and be a catalyst and cut the land costs in half, that's great. But for months and months, we talked about the Klondike Sports Park. And for all we know, to get services out there could take 3 or 4 years and be every bit as much as $12 or $16 million. We have no idea. And yet, that was supposedly a viable alternative. So all I'm saying is that we really need to look at all the information. And I know there's members of this council that were just dead against pretty much anything that was being done. And that was evident over a period of time. But for all the new members of council, there is a lot of information and a lot of meetings and a lot of reading, hundreds and hundreds of hours of reading that I have done that you certainly have not had the opportunity to do. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. And I think what I'm hearing is that council or members around the table want to ensure that all viable options are looked at in a fiscally responsible manner. That is our job to do that. Deputy Mayor?
I think further to Joe's comment is that we just need to pause and investigate all the options. Because I think the community hub or the downtown plan as it's presented was sold to us as a very pretty picture, as a sales pitch. There was a lot of numbers presented. There were some people that said, yeah, it makes sense. Some people said that it didn't. I'm not one that bought into it. So to blindly say, this is the location, based on the information I've been given, I can't support that. Now, there might be more information, there might be no other options, but I think we need to investigate those options, and we need to stop staff time blindly following downtown plan at this point, because I don't think that it's, it may or may not be the answer, but I don't think we need to, that there's enough support for it being the answer at this point.
Okay, Councillor Foster, and then we'll come back.
Sorry, and I'm just, when I, looking at that, there were some very key pieces that went in, that were discussed in past council, but also recently, saying, things like, oh, there's one-third funding. When we've got no commitment from any level of government, not a penny from any level of government there. So I go, I realize it has to be shovel ready, but we have to find the right place to put the shovel, to use your line, to sit there and then go and say, this is it. But again, whether it's, and I said, if it ends up, all arrows point to that hub, then I'll support it. But for now, until I've seen where all the other arrows point and where all the other options are, and if they happen to, I said, if they happen to be right beside each other, perfect. We'll go to the government and say, here they are, whether they're there, or there, and you say, that's it, now show us the money. And if they show us the money, that's a whole different ballpark. But to sit there and say, we're gonna just go with this, and say, we hope, based on something that a previous government has said, the provincial government's changed significantly in its approach to this. The federal, maybe not so much, but.
Well, I think we also have to be aware moving forward that we are realistic in that we need a new arena. We may not get any funding, so we can't pick an overpriced piece of property or pay more for something hoping that we're gonna get that funding. We have to move forward with a plan, act as if we're not getting anything, and if we get something, it's a bonus. Because it's really some things we have to move forward with regardless. Councillor Blanchet?
Just to make it clear, is I'm totally open to look at every possible option that could be better. The point was, we were sort of going down a path is that this was not the right option. And what I'm saying is it shouldn't be ruled out. It should be considered along with everything else. That there could be a better option, but this is more than just building an arena. This was trying to develop an entire downtown and redevelop an entire beachfront. And what were the catalysts that would have to be put in place that would then draw in a lot of additional private investment interest. And we've been waiting a long time for this, 30 years. And we haven't seen that catalyst. And some of the catalysts that are a one-time, one-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and we're suggesting that potentially the location might be somewhere other than anywhere near our core, and the 1.5 million visitation may come nowhere near our core. This will affect our community for the next 50 years. And it could potentially be very damaging to business that exists in our community right now. I'm talking about, of course, the gaming establishment.
Okay, but let's stay on focus here. I think all of us may see a different core in the community, and I think moving forward, we just need to look at these and find the best piece at the right price. I'm taking all these other things into consideration, but we'll be looking at other pieces as a catalyst, such as the beachfront that we own that is costing us money. So there's other things that will be happening maybe in that area, but we need to consider the entire town. Councillor, can you had your hand up? Mm-hmm. Oh, he's like, no, can I go home?
Didn't see that either.
So I know Deputy Mayor Bray, did you have a motion ready, or did you need assistance?
I might need assistance drafting it, but this is the gist of what I'm trying to say, if I could alert the ears of the clerks in the room. So the motion to pause the process that assumes that a double pad arena and library should be located on Main Street, and that we investigate all, and staff investigate all other options, including town-owned lands, public-private partnerships,
And
and.
I think, yeah, do we
You
need
don't
to?
wanna
Including
live-
all, including.
Or just, do I leave it at all, or do I include the public partner or public-private? Because I thought when Councillor Watson mentioned
Other
that, it really was a.
Or, yeah, or just other options.
All options.
Yeah.
All
Okay, so we can
options.
leave it at all options?
All options.
Do you want to take it to the clerk and see
I
if he wants to
could.
take it?
So is it clear enough, I guess, through to George?
Does that give the direction needed?
Could you just repeat that, so?
So a motion to pause the process that assumes, so there's a current motion in place that assumes that the double pad arena and the library will be located on Main Street. So that if we can pause that and then investigate all other options and report back to council.
Okay, so if I may, your worship, so fully investigate all other options. So when I hear the word fully, that's complete costing.
Yep.
So this is option A, fully costed all the way through, everything. Option B, option C, all the way, that's what I like. Good.
Yeah, I don't wanna rush through, so if we need to take a minute and get it right, I would much rather do that. Councillor Blanchet?
Well, just a question on that. These are easy things to say, but what are the kind of timelines involved in that? Because, you know, like, I mean, through this whole process, we were talking about an arena through completion in, you know, a pretty tight time frame, like 2.5, 3 years. Like, we've been working on a lot of this for 3 years. So is this another 3-year process?
No, my own opinion is, I feel that, you know, when you look at the sports park, you know, Public Works Department knows what the services are gonna cost to run out there. There's things that I think that can be pulled
So-
together fairly quickly.
So should we consider some kind of reasonable timeline as to be as fully equipped to review in a period of time so that we're not adding years?
George?
Thank you, worship. I just wanted to mention that some of this work was done. There was a presentation to council with looking at other options that led to this site being looked at. So it would be a matter of pulling that back out, looking at that, considering other options. I was just trying to lean over to the director to see from his thoughts what might be a reasonable time frame. Because a lot of work has been done, and it would just be a matter when you're looking land costs, servicing costs, land acquisition costs. You know, the construction costs, you know, that might be a constant variable across different sites. It's those types of things, any kind of infrastructure improvement costs. I'm just thinking off the top of my head, so.
I think it's more than just Chris's department. I
Oh,
think,
yeah,
you know,
no.
we've got a bunch of department heads, and I honestly believe, you know, no later than March, with the expectation if it could come in February, awesome.
Sure, I think that's.
If that's a fair, Councillor Wells?
Well, I was going to suggest an amendment that simply says that they report back to committee of the whole, which doesn't lock them into a final position, but report back to committee of the whole on progress, not later than March, so, you know, whatever, that gives it 2 months.
End of February, I think.
End of February, but by putting that there, that's a sort of a deadline. It says it report back. Now, the report back may be, we need more time, or the report back may be, here's some solid information for you. But at
Okay.
least
So you called it a friendly amendment, but because we haven't actually moved, seconded, or read it, then
it's
Deputy
Very
Mayor's quite
friendly.
comfortable, so I think the clerk is just kind of doing something over there.
Well, and I agree with Stan, your worship, this is a big project. And
Yeah.
to rush to some final judgment is similar to just saying we're gonna rule out everything
Yeah.
just because it was done previously. We need to have, I hate to use a Senate term, sober second thought. We have to have a good look at this, give staff the correct time, and if they come back and say, you know,
We need
here's,
more time.
we need more time.
Yeah.
But I certainly don't wanna make a decision that's gonna lead to us creating something that's less than optimal. For the sake of 5 months, it's irrelevant, if you look at a 30-year time span on an arena or whatever the.
Councillor
Yeah,
Belanger?
I certainly agree David, Councilor Foster, but I think there's a lot of, folks in our community that they do have an anticipation, and there is quite a sense of urgency related to particularly the library and the Double Fat Arena. So I think by framing it with a reasonable timeline, we can still massage that a little bit, but at least we're sending a message to the community that we're trying to move forward as quickly as possible.
Well, I have to be honest with you, we've been in office for a month, and I think we're moving along pretty good. I think to have this, I'm sorry, I was passing it off to you. I think we're doing pretty good. Moved by Deputy Mayor Bray, seconded by Councillor Wells, be it resolved that Committee of the Whole recommend to Council that staff pause the process that assumes that a double pad arena and library should be located on Main Street and fully investigate all other options, and that staff report back to Committee of the Whole by the end of February.
Report back on their progress. Because report back to me suggests a finality
Okay,
on
so
their progress, yeah.
report back on their progress.
Which may be a final, but may not be.
Yeah. Is that okay to just write that in there?
Friendly
Tina?
amendment.
Okay, we're all good with that, so we can just.
So we'll call for the vote. Councillor Belanger?
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Bray?
In favor?
Councillor Foster?
In favor.
Councillor Kinney?
In favor.
Councillor Watson?
In favor.
Councillor Wells?
In favor?
Mayor by Fulton?
In favor.
The vote is 7 in favor and 0 opposed. The motion is carried.
I was gonna ask one thing.
Depends what it is. Councillor Wells?
Just that came out of the presentations, and so it's just a question. The issue of the archives and the library going forward in the short term, is there any potential to have a discussion with the archivist and the volunteers that support that? And I'm looking at the fact that it's closed for several months, but also, the space that's involved, and I know Pam said something about it in Blockhouse, but you paint the block wall and you cut in a window. If it's going to be useful space, we're not gonna develop a new library, notwithstanding some people's belief that it should happen by the end of January. We could relocate the archives to another town-owned location, one of which might be 140 Main Street, which we now own, in the short term. And the archivist and her volunteers can see that as a beneficial thing, which they may or may not, they may have reasons why it won't work. It's just something I thought that for the library's point of view, and also for the archives, because I know for years they've talked about being too crowded and half the material they have can't be displayed. Maybe there's a potential in the short term to move them to another location. With town resources, I can't imagine it's going to be a significant cost. We already own we own 2 houses and we own a retired reuse center. Somewhere along the way, there's gotta be a place where we can help out both parties. Anyway, just
And I think that's
my thinking.
a discussion that we need to have. What are we doing with some of these properties, and, yeah. Councillor?
Just a quick comment. I think Councillor Wells is on the right track, because I've already seen a posting, I think, by the town archivist, saying that they'd love to go to 140 Main Street, or have that ability to get that archive presentation out there to the public.
Geez, I'm
We'll
smart.
leave these thoughts with you. Okay, we're adjourned.